Hello, bold believers. My name is Alicia Morgan, and I am an engineer, an aerospace and industrial engineer. So, aerospace having to deal with airplanes and actually studying space flight history. And industrial engineering has a lot to do with processes. So, how did I get involved with that? I've been in this field for almost 20 years, and I do a lot to support STEM education. So, for those who may not know what that means, that's science, technology, engineering, and math. So I want to talk to you today about how my career, spanned for 20 years and all the things I've done. But I also want to encourage you, if you're interested in science, technology, engineering, and math, get involved in those kind of camps and robotics. You can be a process person, help build and design, all those things. So when I was younger, about your age, I got involved in a lot of summer camps. So let me share my screen. And I want to tell you a little bit about my career. So I'm going to start off by saying that I want to encourage you to fail forward. So this is me. A few years ago, I did a TEDx talk, and I talked about getting over it and getting on with failure. So I just want you to know that even though if things don't work out exactly where you plan, you can still move forward. You can still be successful, but you have to have the courage to get back up. And I know what it feels like when you fail. You just want to go curl up in the corner. If you have sports or athletics and you don't win the game, I understand how that feels. But every champion went through that. They experienced a valley. They experienced a time when they questioned their faith, but they decided to keep going forward. So let me tell you a little bit more about my career. So here you see there are 8 current steps in my career. I don't know what step 9 was going to be, but let's start with step 1. So I was an intern. And while I was studying engineering at Tuskegee University, that's in Tuskegee in Alabama, it's a historically black college and university, I interned at Lockheed Martin in New Orleans. Well, I'm actually from New Orleans, and at the time it was having to do with space shuttle missions. So during that time, it was a perfect time to learn. So you get involved with some senior leader and you get to, kind of figure out what your skill set, and that kind of set precedent for what my skill set would be, which is being very process and detail oriented. Now, after I graduated from college, I went on to work at Boeing in Seattle. So I went to school in Alabama, from New Orleans, and moved all the way to Seattle as an only child. And I worked at Boeing in Seattle on Boeing commercial airplanes. So if you've ever flown Southwest or some of those airlines, you've probably been on a Boeing plane. And I worked there for almost 5 years, and I did a lot of the airplane deliveries. We're actually testing the airplanes before they get to customers and making sure that they're okay and intact, and doing any design changes or engineering change summaries to do that. And then while I was in school, when distance learning wasn't as popular, when now everything is virtual and online, I studied industrial engineering for New Mexico State University. So I finished my master's degree in industrial engineering. And then you'll notice step 3 is substitute teaching. So how do you go from engineering to substitute teaching? Well, I wanted to move back home closer to New Orleans. So I really, at the time, to move myself from Seattle and to find a position to do something in the meantime, I moved to Houston, Texas, and I did some substitute teaching, which would prove to be valuable in my career, but we'll talk about that later. So I did that for almost a year, and then I moved to the Dallas area. And if you're from the Dallas area, I worked at Raytheon and McKinney. So McKinney, that's North Dallas, and I worked in a manufacturing plant, and it built the circuit cards that go into military aircraft. So earlier I showed you I worked at Boeing, which is commercial aircraft with the planes, like the planes we ride in, and military aircraft for those who are in military service, those aircraft. So in that job, I learned a lot about capital asset management. So basically that's all the equipment that goes into building something that you love. So your phone, there's probably a manufacturing facility that builds that. So supporting that and getting all the equipment you need to make that product. And so that let me learn a lot about strategic planning and how to plan out something being successful. So I worked there for almost 7 years. And then I experienced what a lot of people are experiencing now in COVID-19, or you can experience in your career. I experienced a layoff. So a layoff means that a company is making as much money as they can. So they have what they call a reduction in force, and people are getting laid off. So I was, laid off, And that's what we call a career transition. So I've been laid off before, and guess what? I've also been fired before. Now, that can be devastating. Now, what I want you to understand is that this is a perfect time to talk about when you know in your spirit and God tells you something's not working. So that job I was fired from in 90 days, I knew it wasn't working, but I tried to keep making it work. And that's what you're going to learn in life as you build your character and you build your relationships. You're going to realize some things are not working. You get that inkling, and that could be God trying to tell you something, and just having the courage to listen to that. So I decided, after working in engineering for almost 13 years in the traditional way, and after being laid off and fired, I decided I want to do something different. So in the background of all of this, I was doing a lot to support youth development and leadership. So I said, I still want to use my engineering background in an impactful way, but how can I do that? So I decided that I wanted to work in the nonprofit sector, supporting, STEM education and youth. So I did some nonprofit management certification. So that's a little bit different. It's not like 4 years like a college, but you can get a certification after you've gone to college in something, if you decide, hey, I want to do something different. So I decided I wanted to do something different. And that was a pathway for me to work at Heart House Dallas, which is an after-school program serving refugee and immigrant children. And they are from K to 8th grade, over 120 students in the Dallas area of Vickery Meadow, if you've ever been in that area in Dallas. So I worked in the after-school program, and I worked with K through 2nd grade students, which was the biggest impact that I did, because I learned very early how students learn. So going from, it gave me a different perspective. I was thinking about, how did I learn when I was younger? So I did that. So I worked from K through 2nd grade students. They also had middle school students as well. So it was really a great time for me to see how education and how the things that happen to you affect you, like social and emotional learning. So we talk about learning, but sometimes the things that we go through impact how we learn. And so that gave me a great perspective. Every piece of my journey was a great perspective. So that also helped me learn about processes and systems. So it's still really learning how to make things efficient and taking into consideration on how people learn. So from there, I used those experiences to do some work at Dallas County Community College District, which is now called Dallas College, and some college and workforce readiness initiatives. So the great thing about that, I learned about, you have your traditional student who went from, high school to college, and non-traditional students who work, people who've worked and want to get back and learn a new skill. So it really gets you to understand that in a workforce, you have different people, different backgrounds. Even if you work at a company, you may have a college degree and someone else doesn't. It doesn't mean that they don't have valuable information and insight. So I really want you to understand that. And then my last role, I worked at Frontiers of Flight Museum in Dallas as the Vice President of Education and Programs. So all along the way, I was building these skills. So I started off an intern. I learned a little bit about being an individual contributor, had some leadership, and then it had me go to the next level, which is executive leadership. So if you've ever been to Dallas Love Field, and around the corner on Lemon Avenue, if you ever seen a big Southwest plane sticking out of a building, that is the Frontiers of Flight Museum. So in that role, I actually have gotten to use all the skills that I learned. So as a process-oriented person, I came in and make the programs effective and get feedback from students like you and teachers and industry people, partners about how, what do students like, right? If you can't design something if you don't get feedback from people. So that's a very important thing as you build relationships. You're always getting feedback and having the courage to take that feedback into consideration at all times. So that's very important as well. Now, I want to talk to you next about some career skills that you need. And so as a Christian and you're building your relationships can be hard. In order to be successful, you need 3 forms of capital. So physical capital, what you have, your finances, and your assets. So what you have, money, right? We all love money. So that's definitely you want. So you get that money based on what we call your human capital. So what you know, your skills, your experiences and expertise. At this camp, you're building your C4 skills that will help you in the future. And then a very critical thing, you may have heard of networking and social capital. Well, it's who you know, your relationships, and it's like your friends at school, your teachers, and all those relationships can carry you through the years, right? And people that you meet. Now, you're going to meet with people of different backgrounds, right? You know, we define things by race or gender, but within your own same ethnical background, people are different, right? And you have to learn how to really nurture those relationships to be successful. As I told you about all those 8 stages, relationships matter, right? I had to get references from people that I previously worked with. You know, sometimes you disagree. We have different personalities that we work with, but you can't be successful just by focusing on your human capital, your skills alone. And just because you have money doesn't mean people are going to do certain things. So social capital is very important. If you think about your faith, when we say do unto others as you want them to do unto you, right? We say that. And, you know, and when you think about the Bible and you see how Jesus interacted with people of different backgrounds, and you say, why would you interact with that person? Because everybody has a voice and story that matters, and you do as well. So I want you to keep that in mind. And I want to also talk to you about organizing your portfolio. Like, so right now in camp, you are learning a whole bunch of different skills that matter. And each time you're learning something, you bring something unique to the table. And why does that matter? So let's think about something. Have you ever gone into a store, right? And you intended to buy a certain thing with your physical capital, with your money, and you buy something completely different? It caught your eye, it caught your attention because it was unique. You need to think about yourself the same way. As you are distinguishing yourself, organizing, just keep a track of everything you're doing when you're growing up. Because if I think about when I was a kid, I was always organizing stuff and trying to understand how systems and processes work. So from a very young age, and I was always a great researcher because my parents encouraged me to always read. So at a very young age, I was developing those unique skills. And then those skills becoming in demand, right? In demand skills mean what are vital, right? Some people want great leaders. People want people who can organize well. If you understand finances and money, if you can build relationships, all of those are in demand skills. And every project that you work on, whether you're at school, your school projects, if you do something at home as a project, just ways that you can show that you can organize and execute something from beginning to end. So keep track of those things, because when you get into the real world, you'll have these things called performance evaluations. And that's how people can tell if you're successful. And your leadership skills, they're very important. So as a leader, you're always learning how to interact with people, right? As we talked about earlier, everybody is different. So in order to lead, you have to meet people where they are. Just like you want people to have that same grace with you, you need to do the same thing. And recommendations matter, right? If you are do things consistently well, we always fall short. You can fail sometimes, but get back up. But if you're consistently this person who shows up and does these certain things well, you can get recommendations from your social capital, as we talked about earlier. So now you have a really good background of, you know, what I told you and what I do well. And I hope that this encourages you to move forward in faith. And one of my favorite Bible verses is Psalm 139:14, that says, I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. Remember, we talked about uniqueness. So in those moments when I felt like, oh, I failed, right? I've been fired before, I've been laid off before, I feel uncertain. There was always this reassurance inside that tells me, you know what? I got through that before, I can get through that again. So as you're in this camp and you're building all these skills to be your very best, sometimes you'll have conflict. Sometimes your relationships will seem like it's the end. But if you can continue to move forward and get over it in a way that, you know, you have to get through it first, right? To get over it and get on with it, as I did learn from my TED Talk, you have to get through it. And I've learned from working with students from diverse backgrounds and people from diverse backgrounds, we all operate from a core value. So I encourage you to figure out what your values are. And as you do that, it will help shape the decisions that you make. And as a Christian, you're always trying to figure out, like, is this the right choice to make? But a good way to tell that is to operate from your values. And remember, you are uniquely made. So I encourage you to, as you're in this camp, figure out the things that when you've done it in a camp, oh, I felt so alive. Perhaps that's a skill that will help you in the future. And remember, you can always change your mind, shift focus, because right now I told you there have been 8 steps in my career so far, and my career is not over. There can be 8 more, 20 more, who knows? But I want you to know that every experience that you have is valuable. So if you want to stay in contact with me, again, my name is Alicia Morgan. My personal website is aliciammorgan.com, or you can email me at info@aliciammorgan.com, or Alicia, ALICIA, at aliciammorgan.com. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope you found it valuable, and enjoy your camp. Bold believers, step forward in your faith. God will always make a way, even when you feel like things are not perfect.